Hello and welcome to What's Next with AWS 2026, live from San Francisco, where we're really breaking down all of the announcements around AI and what the movement towards agents really means for organizations and how they can take advantage of some of these great new announcements that have really simplified where you can build and manage and run a lot of the agentic workflows and frameworks. So really excited because I have Bharat Sandhu, who's the lead for AI machine learning marketing with AWS. Welcome on board.
Thank you, Rob.
So one of the things as AWS positions itself as kind of helping be that last mile for AI, going from models to agents and now really into applications with Connect and some of the other things that are being built out with these pre-built agents, but also bringing things with Bedrock and some of the announcements with OpenAI and some of the other things that are going on. What do you see and how do you see AWS uniquely positioned to help people get right what they might have gotten wrong with agents previously?
Rob, I've been in the AI space for over 8 years now, and there's been never a time unlike now, because before, as you know, you had to be a data science team, you had a machine learning team, you had to have your data already and all that stuff. Some of that's still true, but the barriers of entry is so low right now, and we see that. I'll give you some context. In Bedrock, which is our inferencing platform where we host all our models, and it's also the agent building platform with Agent Core. In Q1 2026, Q1, we just entered Q1, the number of tokens processed was more than the tokens processed in all previous years.
Wow.
So it just tells you two things. One is that the demand for a lot of these things is it's just crazy right now, right? It's really astonishing the amount of customer demand we see. And by the way, it's not a few customers. We have hundreds of thousands of customers on Bedrock, just one service itself. The second is the turning to AWS for a lot of this stuff, right? So, there are two things. First, a lot of customers are already on the journey because it's much easier to be on the journey. You'd ask, hey, what makes it easier? How can customers be building better agents right now? Number one is, I'll just ask your audience, is if you're not doing agentic AI, you are totally behind right now already. So you cannot do that. You got to be on the bandwagon and using these things because you'll learn a lot along the way. The second thing is, for those of customers that are getting started but not be very mature, there's some proven steps. There's very proven steps. You got to play with the technology, but you got to have a business use case. And some of the fundamentals have not changed, right? You got to have the right organizational setup to understand what projects you're working on. Will they have a viable business case? How will you test the business case? And then who needs to support the rollout in your organization? Are they on board with that? So the fundamental things, whether it's AI or a data project, those things haven't changed, right? So those things are still critical. But I'll tell you what though, the time to experiment, to pilot, to production has never been lower before. We're doing a lot of things in AWS, happy to go in deeper on to make that possible. But I would just say, start with the basics, understand the use case, play with the technology, enlist the people that need to be enlisted on the journey, and start rolling these things out. And you will learn in your organization what works, what doesn't. And there's some proven use cases that are very transferable, some that are unique, company to company, some low-hanging fruit like coding agents and all that stuff. So we can go into details.
Yeah.
But I'll just say it's really a great time to be in the AI space.
I would say
the best time.
I was going to say, is there a better time? No, there has
best time.
best time.
Yeah.
So let's kind of dive in a little bit because the announcement with Bedrock, managed agents powered by OpenAI, help the people understand what problem is that solving for them as they go on this agentic journey.
So I'm going to park the question in two places, right? For customers that are on the agent journey, let's start there. So if you're a little bit on the agent journey, I think you'll follow along. And if you haven't started yet, we can come back to that too, right? So in the last few years, there have been a lot of frameworks out there, LangGraph, Strands from AWS, Crew AI, and so forth. These are the frameworks that are used to kind of create the workflow, what we used to call workflow back in the day, but really create what we call a harness. Now, what is a harness? An agentic application needs two pieces, a model and everything to make the model run.
Right.
Could be like a while loop, which is essentially what a harness is, right? At the end of the day, could be calling the tools, which is like, hey, I want to call an API, of an application to get the records of my customer, right? Could be through an MCP server. Could be skills, which are really nothing but markdown files, which have instructions on how to do a task, right? So these things have been called in a way around the model. So you have a model, and then you have things around the model, which is called a harness, right? And these frameworks over time have evolved into harnesses, basically. What's happened, though, is increasingly models and harnesses being trained together. So you have an OpenAI model, and you have an OpenAI harness. Similarly, you have a Claude model, and you have a Claude harness around it. So these models are being trained with the harness. What that means is the harness and the model are kind of tightly coupled. So the harness understands how to make the model work the best. The model has been trained to really respond to requests from the harness. So as people start building agents, to get the most of the model, you have to really optimize the harness. Now, if you start with the harnesses optimized for the model, you get to the end state much faster. That's kind of what we're doing with the Bedrock Managed Agents powered by OpenAI. It's OpenAI Frontier Models, along with OpenAI Harness, that works really well for those models. So now you don't have to fine tune all the things. And this is really incredibly important right now because another few months, there'll be another model. You've got to tweak the harness. Now, OpenAI will tweak the harness themselves, right? So just the tight coupling of these things allows you to get started much easier, much faster, and stay consistent. Versus, and by the way, a lot of our customers also want to have choice.
I was going to ask you about Agent Core and the more open way that Agent Core approaches this.
Yeah, and that's the other way, right? So a lot of customers want to have a choice. They don't want to be locked into a specific model. And they also want to be not locked into a specific harness. They maybe want to fine-tune the harness. And the reason why they want to do that is they might want to have multiple models in the sub-agents. Right. Maybe one model optimized for cost and latency for doing summarization. Maybe one model that's really for reasoning, right? So you want to have these kind of multi-model multi-agents architectures. In that case, you want the flexibility of the model choice or the framework choice, and you want to be able to really tweak the harness to your liking. So really the world is, maybe it's back in the Kubernetes world, but basically the world is kind of breaking in two parts. One is opinionated, optimized together, much faster to get working, but it's a little bit locked in, right? Or the other one is fully open, and you use the frameworks, you do the hard work, a little bit harder, and we've made it much simpler in Agent Core also, but you still are relying on models, you're still relying on your own frameworks, and so you have to do some more tweaking. But maybe you can do a lot more tweaking there.
Do you see this, I mean, as people are building these agentic workflows, and like you said, and I think the Connect is a good example of use cases, right? I look at that as, especially when you start to get into where it's being more of moving out of the contact center and being more about a new way of delivering applications. Do you see organizations using those as kind of patterns as they build out on top of Bedrock? As, hey, I like how, the supply chain Connect went through and goes through for my supply chain people. Now I want to build that for my product managers for doing their PRFAQs and things of that nature, and getting it to then output into Atlassian or something like that. Is that where you see them kind of modeling those integrations and how it works with the different systems?
I've seen three patterns, frankly. I've seen three patterns so far. One is customers are literally doing what we would call workflows in the deterministic workflows and using agentic AI to do steps in those deterministic workflows, maybe like summarize a document, do OCR back in the day, but now you can do it much higher accuracy across multiple languages and so forth. But that would be obviously the lowest hanging fruit. Right. In an automation thing, right? Second use case I've seen is building customers. Actually, I was break it into two second pieces. Really coding agents, which is a specific use case, where you have a application, whether it's Kira from us or Codex or Cloud Code or whatever, right? That we've seen just amazing demand for them and amazing adoption in the market because it's for programmers, by programmers. And a ton of improvements have happened there, right? So that's kind of like Quick or Connect for the developers, right? So if we see that. Third one is basically where customers are actually building agentic applications. And I'll give you an example, Strava. I don't know if you're,
so biking, for biking, running, whatever now. I mean.
Good. So if you see Strava now, when you use it, it has something called athlete intelligence. Yeah. Athlete intelligence is basically powered by Bedrock. So here is Strava, amazing applications, amazing end user subscription base, and a ton of data, right? But they have enhanced the customer experience, the user experience, and now they're using a bunch of models on Bedrock to understand the data, summarize it, provide back insights to you as a user saying, hey, you did this thing, and by the way, they have a voice, and if you use the voice thing, we can speak to you saying, hey, great job, Rob,
right.
on this thing. You did a new PR record.
You get your PR going up the hill,
Yeah, but to do that, right, so that's enhancement of the application, right? So that's the second one. And the last one, what I said, is really 4, is brand new applications or rethinking applications from ground up, right? And there, the industry is a little bit new. We are launching with our own Connect set of products that kind of rethink and reimagine supply chain decisions from ground up and things like that. So those are the kind of 4 main domains I see. The last one being, I would say, for the most sophisticated customers, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And do you see them? I mean, for a lot of the organizations I talk to, one of the things too, when they get to that 4th kind of thing, and they want to start small. In fact, at reInvent, I talked to Toyota Motors North America, and we talked about how they actually were building out and doing stuff with their supply chain so that they could automate it all the way down to the folks in the local shops, and so that they knew how much supply they had and where it was coming and when they could get it and where it was at and all of that. But they took very specific. Is that one of the things that you suggest to people, is take a specific process or something and start small and then grow that over time? Or because to me that would seem like the logical way.
Most of the time, but not all the time. Look, some of the fundamentals of rolling out IT projects have not changed. Right? So you got to start small. You got to have you buy-in and got to have a provable use case. The fundamentals have not changed. Frankly, actually, in the GenAI use case, the costs are not predictable. So you got to actually even focus a little bit more on ROI up front and understanding how you're going to calculate ROI. Because it's not seed-based pricing. It's actually token-based pricing, and you really don't know how many tokens you're going to use till you roll things out. And by the way, token usage could also change. So it's highly, unfortunately, not a predictable spend. Right, so ROI is super important. So but other than that, yes, you got to start small. You got to go that, unless you really see you can transform something fully. I'll give you an example. Robinhood, it's a great platform for trading stocks and all. They use GenAI for financial fraud detection, right? So that's something that can be applied in mass. It doesn't have to start small. As more transactions happen, there are more fraud cases there. So before, they had to basically have some triggers. Somebody manually had to go in and look at all the data coming in and all those things, right? Now they've automated with a fleet of agents with human in the loop, by the way, right? So that's something you don't really need to start like, hey, I'm going to start with a set of fraud cases or something, right? We're going to tackle this use case, which is very important for us, and we're going to roll it out all front, right? But you got to be ready for that. And there the ROI was very easy to do, because now you don't have to wait for weeks and weeks. Matt spoke about in the keynote about even insurance claims, right? So some of those use cases you can tackle pretty quickly and in mass. Some of the other ones, maybe in manufacturing supply chain, you want to maybe more pilot and make sure it's proven, because things are working well today. So you want to do iterative improvements there.
Yeah, no, I think that all makes sense. And you actually hit on, and kind of, we'll bring this back around, but you hit on a really important topic of ROI, and I call it the ROAI, the return on AI. So when you look at the return on AI, everybody has different metrics, but you brought up the token economy, and I've talked to CFOs, and they're like, I have no idea, to your point, about how to budget for tokens. And then you got others out there saying, hey, you should be spending $250,000 a year as a developer on tokens. And I liked Matt talking about how they try to give unlimited tokens to the engineers to develop. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially for somebody like Amazon. Do you see people trying to map what they're building to the ROAI and trying to figure out what are the KPIs they should be measuring?
Yeah. First of all, I want to commend you. There used to be ROIC, return on investment capital.
Yeah.
Rob, you've trademarked another term.
There you go.
Return on AI. That's awesome.
I've used it a bunch of times. I think it spells it out for people. Yeah. So yeah.
I would not over-engineer some of these things. Like what you don't want to do is delay getting started, right? Look, and by the way, it doesn't mean when you get started, you're going to be spending a bunch of money.
Right.
The tokens are pretty cheap, right? Depending on the model especially.
Yeah.
But the aggregate spend can get a lot, right? But you got to get started, and then you got to do the ROI at the product and the business, at the project, the business level, not at the token efficiency level. That's a wrong metric, I would say, especially where we're in the industry. But I would tell you this. This is why the vendor or vendors you choose to work with matter. How can you save on tokens? There's a couple of ways. You can use a cheaper model. You can do model distillation.
When you say cheaper model, you mean a smaller model or something, or more focused model? Or?
Yeah, like you can and I don't want to you can use one of the open source models. That'll be like they're maybe $1 per million tokens.
Yeah.
You can use some of the frontier reasoning models, $3 to $10 per million tokens, right? So models come in different sizes, and the different model architectures. The mixture of experts, which are more efficient, the DeepSeek kind of models, right?
Yeah.
Which for the similar performance, you can get a cheaper token price, right? So there's an art here, right? So, but you can choose the model, and then you can choose the platform you want to get the model from. So, and that's what we've invested a ton in Bedrock on. I keep going back to the service as a foundation for a service. We've invested a lot in ensuring customers can save money. So, let me give you a few examples. A, we host a bunch of models, so you can have a choice. Second, we have a lot of things like prompt caching. Mm-hmm. If you come from the data world, which I think you do, you used to have, prompt caching back then, or
SQL and all stored procedures and all of that.
Query caching back in the day,
exactly.
when you're prompt caching. Yeah. But second thing is you can have intelligent routing. So you can have a bunch of models say, hey, all these models could work for me. I have my evals set, and based on the use case, can you route it to the most effective model, meeting the bar? So you have dynamic routing. You have other ways you can buy reserved capacity. So if you know you're going to be using a lot, you can save money there, right? And there's some other ways we've added to just help customers save money. When people use all our capabilities, they can save up to 50 to 90% on the same model, right? And then we also have model distillation,
right?
Where you can actually distill the model into something, right? So so just from a cost savings perspective, this, by the way, the three things you want to measure: performance, security, and cost. I just worked on one of them. There's a lot of, you should evaluate which platform can give you the most options to help you save most money, because that'll give you more levers going forward.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense, and I appreciate you going through that, because I think one of the things is that a lot of people, like the talk last year was all about training models and stuff like that. And it seems like it's flipped, that the workloads are, if it was 70, 80% training models last year, it's going to be 70, 80% inference this year going forward. Do you see that in the workloads?
It's actually today, I would say, it's flipping today. It's, I think, it's certainly not the 50%, it's at the industry level, close to 60% spend on accelerated computers and inferencing versus training. By the way, the inferencing stack is super complicated.
Yeah.
The training stack is very GPU intensive, right? The inferencing stack is super complicated. Like if you look at the inference, and I'll tell you why the spend is going towards more and more inferencing. There's, just to maybe for your audience to simplify, when you make a call to an LLM, the 4 steps are happening. First, tokenization. So you say, hi, Rob, how you doing? That is broken into tokens, which is a set of words.
Right.
That's tokenized. That's CPU bound. That's a string operation. So that's CPU bound, not GPU. Then you got to load all the context into a KV cache as a key value pair. Yep. We call it pre-fill phase, because the way the generated models work is they look at everything that's preceded, then they predict the next token, but they got to look at it. So that phase of pre-filling is GPU intensive. Then to read everything is memory intensive. And then you got to de-tokenize it. So when you read it to make a token, it's not the call to GPU is not that intensive, but to read is memory intensive. Then you got to de-tokenize it, that's CPU bound. So the inferencing stack is now CPU, GPU, not just HBM. You need SRAM, right? That's why a partnership with Cerebras is super important, and hence the aggregate spend here is a lot more, but the architecture to build it is super complicated. So in Bedrock, we've kind of assembled these pieces with Trainium, with Gravid on our own CPU, with the head node, helping customers, again, get the cost savings and efficiencies. And it's so it is certainly more on inferencing, but the inferencing architecture is very complicated.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if I led you to it.
No, that was. Yeah. I think that to me was when we're seeing it in the data where it's really flipped hard towards inferencing, and people, like you said, are trying to figure out where do they do the inferencing and things of that nature, which the distillation comes in because, hey, I want it to run more efficiently because I'm going out into, an outpost or something like that, or out to an edge location where I want to actually do something like that. And that has to factor into, I'm sure, how you're building these services out.
And one other thing on inferencing stack, which is very fascinating, right? Like normally you have a web request kind of thing. Hey, I'm going to make a request, but the inferencing workload is also different. Not only the stack is different, but you could just say, hey, you're from Boston, right?
Yeah.
What's the weather in Boston? That's a very simple request. The next day you can come in, or the next hour you can come and saying, okay, hey, like here are all my tax documents from all the last 20 years. Can you analyze all them? And then you're uploading a bunch of documents, and tax maybe not that complicated, but imagine uploading a lot of documents or doing a lot of reasoning. And that's a very different kind of request, right?
Right.
So the inferencing is a fascinating problem from an architecture perspective because the variability is so big, the constraints are so many, right? But the demand is amazing. It's really, really skyrocketing. I mentioned in Q1, we've seen more tokens inferenced on Bedrock than all preceding years.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think that we're just at the precipice of where it's going, and I really appreciate this. So thanks for coming on board, Bharat. Really appreciate it.
Totally. Thanks, Rob.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.